All right, let's do something a little bit different today. We're going to shift our perspective away from traditional mythology and ancient history, and we're looking at things through the lens of high-level corporate consulting. Move over Sun Tzu and the Art of War. In this explainer, we are looking at one of the most famous ancient texts in the world, the Mahabharata. But not just as a story, we're looking at it as an absolute masterclass in strategy.
So think about this, and let's challenge our standard paradigm for a second. When we look at the source material, Krishna wasn't just a divine figure or a charioteer driving around the battlefield. In the context of this epic war, he was really the ultimate manipulator of Dharma Yud, which is a righteous war where the overarching vision justifies the tactics used. You've got to think of him like a brilliant chief executive, a guy who is actively designing the entire board before the game even starts. He didn't pick up a weapon himself, right? And yet, literally every single move on that battlefield was dictated by his overarching vision.
So here is our executive summary. We are going to decode Krishna's approach to complex conflict resolution through three core strategies: psychological warfare, strategic sacrifice, and calculated patience.
First up, the Master Strategist's Playbook. To truly grasp this framework, we first have to look at how a master strategist prepares their team long before the actual conflict even kicks off, because every piece must be in place before the game begins. The sources tell us about a really crucial moment before the war where Krishna showed Draupadi the devastating future that was about to unfold. He strategically utilized her deep personal pain to totally align his team's motivations. If you're a consultant, this is classic, textbook stakeholder alignment. He knew for sure that to achieve the ultimate goal, his key players had to be psychologically hardwired for absolute war.
Moving on to mastering psychological pressure.
Look, in any massive project or conflict, you are eventually going to face a competitor who seems completely unbeatable. In our case study here, that was Guru Dronacharya. Dronacharya was an unmovable mountain. As a warrior and a teacher, he simply could not be defeated with conventional weapons or brute force. Physical invincibility. But Krishna, acting as the ultimate consultant, identified a fatal vulnerability. Dronacharya had a deep psychological attachment to his son, Ashwatthama.
So to bypass that physical threat, Krishna deployed a highly targeted disinformation campaign. He actually had Bhima kill an elephant that just so happened to be named Ashwatthama. Then he had Yudhishthira, a guy literally famous for never lying, declare, "Ashwatthama is dead," while deliberately lowering his voice for the word elephant. It is an absolutely brilliant tactic straight out of ancient military doctrines, where deception is the very foundation of warfare. It wasn't a sword that defeated the invincible Kuruwa. It was the absolute psychological devastation of that half-truth that broke his spirit entirely, causing him to just drop his weapons.
The really crucial takeaway here is that in your own leadership challenges, if you can catch the opponent's weak nerve, you can bypass brute force entirely. You don't always need more budget or a bigger team than your competitor. If you can identify their emotional vulnerability during a tough negotiation or conflict, you win. The mindset always breaks before the body does.
Next, let's talk about exploiting the smallest weakness. Let's see how this builds when you're facing a flawlessly prepared competitor. Enter Duryodhana. He was on his way to see his mother, Gandhari, who was about to use her mystic vision to make his entire body an invincible iron shield. If this actually happened, the Pandavas would have lost the war instantly. Game over. But Krishna executed a brilliant three-step trap right before that meeting took place.
Notice the tactic used here: psychological nudging. Krishna didn't physically stop Duryodhana from going. Instead, he casually intercepted him and mocked him for visiting his mother entirely naked, asking if it really suited a grown man. It's the ancient equivalent of a casual water cooler comment that just completely destroys the competitor's confidence. By gently poking at his ego and planting this tiny seed of shame, Krishna nudged Duryodhana into covering his thighs with the garment made of leaves. And that one single decision left his thighs unarmed. It created the exact tiny vulnerability that Bhima would later exploit to win the final battle.
This brilliantly illustrates a core tenet of high-level strategy. Even when a competitor comes to the table perfectly prepared, backed by massive resources, you can use their own ego to deliberately manufacture a fatal flaw. You just have to know exactly where to apply the nudge, because the biggest move is always when the opponent defeats themselves.
Which brings us to strategic sacrifice and timing.
Now, as any good executive knows, you can't always win with just a clever nudge. Sometimes real conflict resolution requires enduring a massive, calculated loss. Take the Karna problem.
Karna was holding on to a lethal weapon, the Nagastra, specifically saving it to eliminate the Pandava's star player, Arjuna. To neutralize that huge threat, Krishna deployed Bhima's son, Ghatotkacha, to wreak absolute havoc on the enemy camp at night. Ghatotkacha was so destructive that Karna was pushed into a corner, completely forced to liquidate his ultimate asset just to survive the night.
Now here's what's fascinating. While the rest of the camp mourned the devastating loss of Ghatotkacha, the sources note that Krishna actually smiled. Why? Because he had successfully bought critical time and neutralized the biggest threat to his key asset. It teaches us that in business, sacrifice has to be born from strategic decision, not emotion. Letting go of a precious project, a beloved product line, or taking a massive short-term hit, sometimes that is the absolute only way to secure the ultimate win. You have to drop the emotional baggage.
Now let's explore patience in conflict resolution. What happens when an attack is highly personal? 100. That number represents Krishna's very calculated promise to his relative Shishupala's mother. He promised her that he would silently absorb and forgive exactly 100 public insults from Shishupala before retaliating.
During a massive public assembly, Shishupala hurled insults at Krishna, calling him a coward, a thief, totally unfit for leadership. Now, most leaders, they let their ego take over and react immediately. But instead, Krishna sat in total silence, just counting. 97, 98, 99. He waited until the opponent completely overextended themselves, destroying their own credibility in front of the entire assembly. And on mistake number 101, Krishna deployed his final, decisive action, eliminating the threat instantly. Calculated patience.
And finally, breaking rules for greater goals.
So, what do you do when playing by the rules literally guarantees failure? During their climactic battle, Krishna manufactured a false sunset. Thinking the day's fighting was over, according to the strict rules of war, Karna dropped his weapons to fix his chariot. It's a ruthless pragmatism that perfectly mirrors ancient political doctrines. Sometimes the established rules are merely obstacles to victory. Krishna ordered Arjuna to strike the unarmed man.
This is the very concept of Dharma Yudh. It's essentially ancient Machiavellianism. Krishna teaches us that if a competitor is breaking the rules to win, remaining silently obedient to convention is a complete failure of leadership. You have to speak the language of chaos to defeat it.
To wrap up this explainer, let's look at the full board one more time. Catch the weak nerve, nudge the opponent's ego, buy time with strategic sacrifice, utilize calculated patience, and bend the rules for the greater goal. These 5 tactics, drawn right from an ancient battlefield, form a devastatingly effective framework for modern conflict resolution.
The aftermath of the Mahabharata left behind ashes, yes, but Krishna protected the future. He ensured the survival of the righteous lineage. He proved that true leaders cannot afford to be rigidly bound by convention. Sometimes you must wield chaos to establish long-lasting order.
I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to consider today. Look at your current projects, your competitors, the struggles you're facing right now. Are you merely reacting to the blows as they come, or are you stepping back, like the ultimate executive, and strategically designing the battlefield before the game even begins? Keep that in mind the next time you face an impossible challenge in your own boardroom.